Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of HC Daily, a podcast that hopefully you're on the journey with us, and we're excited to be with you. I'm Chris Zarbaugh. This is Jeff Forrester, and we have Jackie Werner here today. And
Jackie.
if you've been to Heritage Church and you've, went through the lobby, chances are you've seen Jackie there,
Absolutely.
serving, greeting, and all the above. So, Jackie, tell us what you're involved in and how long you've been around Heritage and things like that.
Well, our family's been at Heritage since September of 2004.
Wow.
So we've been there a long time. And, raised our family there and still involved there doing different things. We've done different things over the years, all kinds of things. And outside of our church, I'm involved in a ministry called Bible Study Fellowship, BSF, and I've been involved with that almost as long as I've been at Heritage, so probably 16 years or something, and kind of had different roles within that as well. And it's it's a big part of our lives. My husband's involved in it too, in the men's area. So it's a good ministry to go along.
So real quick, who's invited and when do you meet?
My class is all women. Our class in particular meets on Tuesday mornings from 9:30 to 11. And it's free. And there's children. We have a really great children's program, too, that teaches the kids the same thing we're learning, but at their level. And so it's free and open to any women who want to come. And there is a men's group that meets on Monday nights as well in the area. And the same thing. And there's a school-age program that goes along with that. So
Great.
So if you're interested in that, send just a generic email on our website to our church, and we'll make sure that it gets to Jackie.
Yeah.
We love Bible Study Fellowship, and so proud of you for having such a strong leadership role in that. That's
It's
fantastic.
a blessing. Yeah.
Well, she's one of my favorite teachers, by the way. If you've ever had a chance to hear her teach, or she's spoken on our stage several times, and just really great. I think you're going to really like today's discussion, is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to be reading one of the coolest stories, maybe the most dynamic miracle that Peter's a part of in his life, right here in Acts chapter 9. So Acts chapter 9, I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation, and I'm going to start in verse 36. We'll read to the end of the chapter. It says, "There was a believer in Joppa named Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas." She should go by Tabitha, by the way.
Yeah, I like that better.
She was always doing kind things for others and helping the poor. About this time, she became ill and died. Her body was washed for burial and laid in an upstairs room. But the believers had heard that Peter was nearby in Lydda, so they sent 2 men to beg him, "Please come as soon as possible." So Peter returned with them, and as soon as he arrived, they took him to the upstairs room. The room was filled with widows who were weeping and showing him the coats and other clothes that Dorcas had made for them. But Peter asked them all to leave the room, and then he knelt down and prayed. Turning to the body, he said, "Get up, Tabitha." And she opened her eyes. When she saw Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up, and then he called the widows and all the believers, and he presented her to them alive. And the news spread through the whole town, and many believed in the Lord. And Peter stayed a long time in Joppa, living with Simon, a tanner of hides. Wow. What a cool story. So here's Tabitha, Dorcas. You can interchange those names. And she's just making such a big impact, and then she dies. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I love that, you can read through that passage and it's kind of amazing. But when you sit in it for a while and you just stay there, you look at all the other things that you can really pull out of it, and it's very cool. And the first thing that I kind of noticed when I was reading through it, aside from, someone got raised from the dead, which is huge,
Right.
Was just how God values everyone. Because here is this little widow. I don't know if Tabitha herself was a widow, but she worked with the widows. She made things for the poor. She made robes for the poor, and God noticed her. And the widows were all grieved that she was gone. She was this little local disciple who made a huge impact where she was. And then they send Peter. They go get the big guy, Peter, who's a huge apostle in the area. He's a church leadership, and he comes to care for her. And it's just amazing. And on top of that, being a woman in those days, we know they did not have very many rights. It's just a fact. But the Bible calls her a disciple or a believer, which in those days, and that meant she counted.
Right.
She counted among them with equal value with the men, which was huge. So it just shows me that God just values everyone. Yeah. It doesn't matter what your role is. It doesn't matter male, female. You matter to him.
Yeah.
And I love that.
That seems to be a theme, it's kind of a sub-theme for Luke, talking about the value of women. Oftentimes when he writes, if he tells about a miracle that happens to a man, which happens just before this, where Peter heals a guy named Aeneas, right? almost always Luke will take a story of a miracle for a man and then follow it right up with a story about a woman. And Luke is sending this message that men and women are equal in Christ, which was so uncommon, in that culture and at that time. So I think it's fabulous that you pointed that part of it out, and that she was an equal disciple with the rest of the followers of Jesus.
Right.
Yeah, so I remember just going into ministry when I was getting out of Bible college in 1983, and I remember getting to this small church, and he said, "Okay, your duties on Sunday morning are to change the sign." We had one of those signs with the letters, and then your job is to make the coffee and open up all the doors and set up chairs and all these just menial tasks that nobody wants to do.
Right.
And my brother, who was a bigwig electrical engineer, visited, and he was with me, and I'm doing all these menial tasks, and he says, he goes, "I have administrative assistants that do all this for me." And, just like as if it's like, not a privilege to do those things. And I looked at him and I said, "You know what, dude?" I said, "Something that you fail to realize." I said, "It's a privilege for me to make the coffee," right? So Jesus, he bows down and he takes, he washes the disciples' feet. He models it by doing the lowest of things. And I love what you said here. You said that, she mattered what she did. Peter comes. He raises her from the dead. And so it's just a great reminder that whatever you do, whether you turn a knob, whether you greet, whether you serve in a church in a seemingly insignificant way, that you matter to God.
Yeah, that kind of actually led right into the kind of the second, they almost, parallel or they combined to go together. Sorry. But yeah, the fact that our gifts are different and they matter. And back then, she made robes. Would maybe not seem like a big deal to her, but all those women were grieving because she was gone and she had mattered to them. And so today, exactly the same thing. What do you do in church? I mean, you don't have to be on the stage to be important and needed. And I kind of think of it like a puzzle. Like if you're doing a puzzle, if there's one piece missing, it's going to bug you. That puzzle's not complete until that one piece is there. And every little job, every part of us has a job that is important to that puzzle, and it's not complete unless we're all doing it. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. The most vulnerable people in that society were widows and orphans, because it was such a man-centric society that a woman, a widow, couldn't take care of herself. If her husband didn't leave significant resources when he died, or if she didn't have a substantial dowry before she got married, she was just totally on her own, and the most fragile people in society. Even today, the majority of people in poverty in America are single moms, right? I mean, it's the largest population segment is single moms. And so here's Tabitha, who says, "You know what? You're important to me." And so I don't, I'm not the preacher. I'm not the guy out there doing all these other things, but for these ladies, I'm going to clothe you. And I don't think there's anything that brings more dignity to a human than good clothes, nice clothing, right? And so this is what she's doing, is she's giving dignity to these women. And this is why they feel such a great loss, is because she makes us feel pretty. She covers us. She's taking care of us. And we've lost her. And I just think it's really important. You mentioned that she was an equal disciple with all the other disciples. I would say maybe God looks at what she did as more significant, because he did not raise Peter from the dead. He did not raise, Andrew and James and John from the dead. He raised Tabitha from the dead. This is the one Christian. There's one more that happens, but this is the one in this story where he says, "She's so important to my ministry right now. I need her back." And it was the power of Christ. It wasn't Peter that did it. It's clear that it's the power of Christ who did it. But this is how important her work was, and how important the ladies she was serving are to God.
Yeah. So let's talk about Peter for a minute. I mean, Peter, this is his one time that he's raising somebody from the dead.
Yeah.
Think about how far he's come in his journey. So, he's already, healed a lame person who couldn't walk. Silver and gold have I none, stand up and walk. And then now he's doing something like this. You want to comment about that?
Yeah, definitely, because I thought too with Peter, the fact that he went to her was important, shows his humility there too. But also when he walked in the room, I kind of wonder, they took him up to the upstairs room. What was he thinking they were expecting? Did he think that they expected him to raise her from the dead? That wasn't necessarily going on every day there, right? So I wonder, but you know what he did? He did what he saw Jesus do.
Right.
He had witnessed Jesus raise people from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, he's saying, well, what did Jesus do? I guess I'll do that. And so he cleared everybody out of the room. Jesus had done a similar thing earlier with another person's daughter, and he had cleared everybody out of the room. So Peter did that. But then he got down on his knees and he prayed. And that, to me, is significant because he knew whatever was going to happen, it wasn't going to happen from him. And I think he suspected they wanted something big from him, but it wasn't going to come from him, like you said, Jeff. It was God's power in him. But he prayed because he had seen Jesus do that. So he followed that, and maybe it was in that prayer that he was told, you're going to raise her from the dead. Or maybe he knew ahead. I don't know. But he didn't just go in and blast into the room and say, watch me do this, you know.
Stand back.
Right, right. And it was private because it wasn't for his glory. It was for the Lord's glory. And he knew he just had to do what he saw being done. So
this story parallels almost identical to when Jesus goes into the room where Jairus' daughter is. So Peter is there, and then Jesus, all the mourners are in the room, and Jesus dismisses all the mourners, just like Peter does in this story. The difference is Peter, you can still see he's still following the Jewish laws. You don't touch a dead body because that makes you unclean, right?
Yes.
So he's still following some of the traditional things that he believed, whereas Jesus reaches out and he takes the little girl's hand and he says, Talitha kum, which means young girl or young lady, stand up, right? Whereas here he says, Tabitha, stand up.
Almost the same words.
Right. So he goes right down the same line. I saw Jesus do it. I'm going to do it. What better thing when you don't know what to do as a Christian? You show up at in a difficult situation. Just do what Jesus would do.
Right.
And then you don't know. Maybe God shows up. Maybe God does something great. The difference is also Jesus not being afraid of being defiled by death. Right. Overcame death. And so this is where I think what drove Peter to his knees. Where Jesus had no fear of being overcome by death. He could just grab her by the hand and raise her up. Whereas he goes, I'm still a human. And he goes to his knees and said, Jesus, I need you to help me here. Yeah. And that's when he raises her from the dead. So it's in Christ. And so then Christ gets all the glory. Right. Because nobody in those last verses, it didn't say many people believed in Peter. Right. Or more people came out to hear Peter preach. No. It says many people heard what happened and they trusted Christ. Yes. So it's important whenever God does do something good in us, any good thing in us is Jesus. And we need to make sure that Jesus gets the glory.
Yes.
So if you were to, Jackie, give our listeners one final thought to take away for the day, what would you say?
One final thought. Well, there's so many you could really take away, but I think that I had actually a couple, but they're short. So all great things done for God start with prayer, right? We don't just go, I'm going to do this. We always go in prayer. So all great things done for God. But then the second thing is learn from Jesus and do what he did.
Oh, good.
Just simple. Just watch him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, that's a great time together. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time for another edition of HC Daily.